Hey, it's Tom from Audio Ordeal, and I'm going to be showing you how to decide whether you want to have the sub with the bass or if you want it separate. Now, this is quite a common question for many people. When you open up synths such as Serum, you have a dedicated sub channel. Synths like Massive have 3 oscillators, one of which you can use as a sub channel. And people always ask, do you include this or do you make a separate channel to process like individually, because the sub frequencies are often their own thing in a song, and so it's all about deciding for your song what you want your sub to be. So I have the same melody and I have it twice here. So the first time we have a just standard house beat sample and a little bass line. I'll play it for you. So that is just a standard bass line, and with this we have our bass and the sub is on. Now then, what I can do, I can solo this other channel and we have the bass and sub separate. So as you can see, on the bass channel the sub's off, and on the sub channel it's only the sub. These oscillators are off. Now then, I'm using a triangle sub frequency wave because it's slightly noisier, it's slightly more audible if your headphones aren't great. And you will notice that the patches are identical. The only thing different between the blue and the pink is that in the pink, on one of them I've deactivated the sub, and on the other one I've deactivated everything else. There is some processing just before we get started. Oh, wrong channel. Yeah, so there is some processing just before we get started. I've added this, but I've made sure it doesn't get affected by the bass going in and out. So no multiband compression or anything which could massively skew the results. So really what's happening just now is we're about to do a test to see which one for this sound is better and discuss why. So what we have, we've got a small sidechain compression. So every time the kick drum plays or any frequency below 116 Hz, it dips the bass channel. Let's have a listen. So this is it without. And this is it with the sidechain compression. So far, as we're looking at it, having the bass and sub combined isn't that big a problem. It's quite a good sound. You could probably get away with having that as a drop for a more minimal track, or maybe an intro bass line for a slightly more exciting track. Let's have a little listen to with the sub separate from the bass. So what I've done here, you'll see that there's no other processing on just the bass channel, but I have sidechain compressed the sub channel. So this means that if we solo the sub and drums, you can hear it bouncing a little bit. I'll turn this off. And we'll activate it so it is the bass and sub together. So as you can hear, when we're comparing this one to the blue, we notice that the blue one is a lot more bouncy. And that's because everything is getting sidechain compressed to the kick. Whereas here, let's say we only want the sub frequencies to be sidechained. Let's say we don't want that pumping bass sound of sidechain compressed house music. Then we can really just sidechain compress the sub, and that allows us more low frequency room for mixing the kick and the sub and other frequencies together. So immediately, depending on what sound you're looking for, if you're looking for a heavily sidechain bass sound, it's probably quite reasonable to just combine the bass and sub. If you really don't want that, but you're trying to sidechain just the low frequencies, then I recommend you split up the bass and sub for separate processing. Pretty much everyone will sidechain the low frequencies to the kick. Even if you're not wanting a bouncing kind of house sound, just adding a little tiny touch of sidechain compression just allows you to scoop the low frequencies out every time the kick plays, and it just provides you with a bit more headroom. So if you're trying to do that and you don't want to affect all the upper frequencies, then separating the bass and the sub is very handy. Another good thing to consider is, let's say we're building up our track. So let's say we've got 4 measures and the final 2 are the drop. So what we can have here, we can glue these together. And if we do Shift E in Reaper, EQ, we can build up to a drop and then have the same bass line, but all of a sudden when the drop kicks in, there's so much more low frequency. So let's have a listen. So as you can hear, if you want that bass line to be prominent throughout, but you want the weight added in for the drops, you really don't want to be EQing it out, because that takes away some of the sound that can mess with all the different compression and mixing later down the line. So if you have a separate subline underneath your main bass line, all of a sudden when it kicks in, it will have more weight. So they're probably the two main features. If you want everything sidechain compressed together and bouncing, I recommend you just combine the bass and the sub and sidechain to the beat. If you want a bit more control, even if you want to sidechain both but sidechain the sub much harder, I recommend splitting it up. And splitting it up also has the advantages of you can take the sub out and still have the low mid frequencies for maybe build-ups and verses, and then for when you want it to get really heavy, when the beat kicks in really hard, you can add the low frequency subs in. So this was just a quick tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. Give a like and subscribe, and any questions or tips and tricks for people, leave in the comments. Many thanks.